Welcome back to It's Just Queen Bee's Thoughts. Today's episode is all about the science behind addiction, specifically what happens in the brain when addiction takes hold. Addiction is often misunderstood, and people struggling with it can face blame or judgment. But what if we could understand addiction as a brain-based disorder rather than a choice or a moral feeling? By exploring the brain's role in addiction, we can gain empathy, understanding, and insight into the powerful journey of recovery. Let's take this deep dive together. To understand addiction, we first need to understand the brain's reward system. This system is the network of brain regions that respond to pleasurable activities. When we do things that are essential for survival, like eating or socializing, the brain releases a chemical called dopamine. Dopamine isn't just the feel-good chemical. It's actually a crucial teaching tool. It signals to our brain that an experience is valuable and worth remembering, which encourages us to repeat those activities. For example, when we eat food, dopamine reinforces that behavior, making it more likely we'll eat again when we're hungry. Now, here's where addiction comes into play. Substances like drugs and alcohol artificially flood the brain with dopamine, often at levels far higher than what we experience from natural rewards. This powerful dopamine surge tricks the brain into thinking that the substance is essential for survival. This is where addiction truly hijacks the brain. Normally, our brain knows how to balance pleasure and need, but substances throw off this balance, convincing the brain that the substance is a priority. Over time, the brain adapts to this constant dopamine flood by becoming less responsive to it, leading to tolerance. This is why someone might need more of the substance to feel the same effects. Imagine a speaker system blaring music loudly at a party. At first, everyone hears it clearly, but eventually the guests get used to the volume. Now to feel that same excitement, the volume has to be tuned up even more. In the brain, this means needing more of the substance to get that initial high, and this escalation is one of addiction's hallmarks. Let's talk about neuroplasticity. The brain is remarkably adaptable, able to form new connections and pathways based on our experiences. This plasticity is usually positive, allowing us to learn new skills or adapt to new environments. However, addiction rewires these neural pathways in a way that prioritizes the substance above all else. In addiction, the brain essentially rewires itself to focus intensely on the substance. New pathways form that tell the brain, this is important. This is worth pursuing, even at the expense of relationships, career, or health. This is why addiction is so challenging to break free from. It's not just about resisting cravings. It's about reshaping deeply ingrained patterns in the brain. The silver lining is that just as the brain can change due to addiction, it can also rewire itself in recovery. This process can take time and patience, but with consistent new habits, the brain can begin to form healthier pathways and connections that support recovery and well-being. Now, let's focus on the prefrontal cortex, a part of the brain responsible for decision-making, impulse control, and planning for the future. In addiction, this region of the brain is often impaired, which makes it harder to resist cravings and make sound decisions. Think of the prefrontal cortex as the brain's executive control center. It helps us pause before making choices and consider long-term consequences. But under the influence of addiction, this part of the brain doesn't function as well. As addiction progresses, the balance between the impulsive, reward-driven parts of the brain and the rational, decision-making prefrontal cortex gets thrown off. It's like having a car with a weakened brake system. When cravings hit, the gas pedal is pressed down hard, but the brakes aren't strong enough to stop the impulse. This is why, for people with addiction, cravings can feel overwhelming and often overpower logic or willpower. Stress is another significant factor in addiction, often acting as a trigger for cravings or relapse. When we're stressed, the brain's limbic system, which controls emotions, responds by seeking comfort or escape, sometimes through substances. The limbic system, sometimes called the emotional brain, plays a key role in how we process fear, pleasure, and motivation. For someone in recovery, stress can make the brain crave the dopamine rush associated with the substance use as a way to escape uncomfortable feelings. This is why stress management is such an essential skill for long-term recovery. Mindfulness, exercise, and other stress relief techniques can help strengthen the brain's natural resilience, making it easier to handle stress without turning to substances. Building healthy coping mechanisms is like reinforcing the brain's natural defenses, allowing the prefrontal cortex and the limbic system to work together more effectively. Many people see relapse as a failure, but the neuroscience of addiction tells us that relapse is actually a common part of the recovery process. Because addiction has rewired the brain so deeply, it's normal for the brain to sometimes revert to old patterns under stress or temptation. Relapse doesn't mean that recovery isn't working. It means the brain is still adjusting. Remember, it took time for addiction to reshape the brain, and it will take time to rebuild healthy patterns. Compassion and support are essential here, as recovery is a journey of gradual change, not an overnight transformation. One of the most inspiring parts of the science behind addiction is neuroplasticity. Our brains are always capable of change, growth, and healing. With consistent recovery efforts, new pathways that support health, well-being, and resilience can emerge. Every small step in recovery, whether it's a healthy habit, a moment of self-reflection, or a connection with a supportive community, helps to reinforce the brain's healing process. Over time, these small steps add up, creating new pathways that support sobriety and peace. Thank you for joining me on this exploration into the neuroscience of addiction. Understanding addiction as a brain-based disorder can help us reframe it as a complex health issue deserving of empathy and compassion. The journey to recovery is about healing the brain, which takes time, patience, and support. Remember, with every effort in recovery, you are reshaping your brain and reclaiming your life. Until next time, take care, be gentle with yourself, and keep moving forward.